All right, I think we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the spoiler discussion for the Tawny Man Trilogy by Robin Hobb. I am so excited for this. I absolutely adored this trilogy. I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it since I finished reading it a few weeks ago. And I am so excited to talk with my four awesome guests and the live chat about everything that happened in this trilogy. And I think we're going to start with Fool's Fate and then just kind of work our way through this trilogy just because I think it makes more sense to do that just for this discussion specifically. But I think before we start diving into Fool's Errand, I'm just going to have everyone kind of go around and introduce themselves, introduce their channels, and then maybe just like some quick general overview thoughts on what your opinions are on the Tawny Man trilogy as a whole compared to, everything else in the realm of the Elderlings. Okay. So I guess, Derry, if you want to go first, then we can kind of go around clockwise.
No worries. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Derry from Derry's Read It Before and sort of self-appointed queen of the Hobb fans because I have read it a ridiculous amount. Tawny Man is my favourite of the sub-series, not by a lot. I mean, they're pretty fantastic. But two of my three favourite individual books are in Tawny Man. So just overall, this is the series within the series that is what has connected me so strongly to it. So it's a really good trilogy. Really good.
Yeah. Awesome. Chris?
I would say that Tawny Man, I don't know if Tawny Man is my favorite trilogy, but I will say that Fool's Fate is definitely probably my favorite book in the whole series. It's so hard for me to rate them by trilogies, but Fool's Fate is really one of the best books that Robin Hobb has done. She really weaves together the ends so well without anything feeling like it's too neat. And I think that overall I find the Tawny Man trilogy to be a slightly more intimate, slightly more mature trilogy than the Farseer trilogy, which makes sense as the character ages, the story progresses and points through his adulthood, and I just absolutely love it.
Awesome.
Josh? I'm Jake. Oh, sorry,
or Jake.
Wrong order.
Doesn't matter.
No, I hate Tawny Man, obviously, and think it. No. Tawny, it's kind of 1B, 1A, 1C. Who knows? It's hard to rank the trilogies. Fool's Fate and Fool's Errand, I think I like as much as any collection of words that you wanna show me. I still really like the Golden Fool, but I do like 1 and 3 a little bit more. I basically like the because like the Golden Fool is just Hobb being like, yeah, I can have a book that has middle book syndrome, and it's like it's still really good. If anyone else wrote the Golden Fool, I'd be like, okay, no, you didn't pull this off, but she kind of got away with it. So, I think Fool's Errand is my favorite of the three, but it's Fool's Fate is like, I'm not gonna fight anyone who says Fool's Fate's better.
All right. Well, I'm Josh. Red Fury Books is my channel. I would say right now, I just finished the full Realm of the Elderlings in early November, so I'm about a month removed from that, and I'm still in the kind of flip a coin between Tawny Man and Fitz and the Fool as far as what I like most, as well as Fool's Fate and Assassin's Fate. Both of those two books in very different ways just touched me fundamentally as a human being. And I love both of those, I would say, equally. So kind of coin flip on both of those as well. I will say that the beginning to Fool's Errand, the first 200 pages or so, is one of my favorite portions of the entire Realm of the Elderlings. And I would say the end of Fool's Fate is another entire portion. So the thing is, Hobb is so remarkable that it's hard to just say this one thing is the best or this one thing is the best, because she's constantly just doing incredible things. So it's hard to just say, oh, Fool's Fate is the best or this one is the best, because I kind of love it all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me, as soon as I finished Fool's Fate, everyone's asking this or Live Ships, which one's your favorite? And I think for me, as a trilogy, as a standalone trilogy, Live Ships is fantastic and probably the tightest trilogy in Realm of the Elderlings so far that I've read. But Tawny Man, I think, is my favorite strictly because I feel like it was the culmination of everything we saw in Farseer brought to, 15 years later, plus, some things that we saw in Lifestream Traders brought to this trilogy. And I just thought this trilogy did a ridiculously good job of just tying everything we have seen together, leaving some things open, but having probably just one of the most emotional journeys I've read in fantasy for specifically, but also just reading in general. It was just, I don't know, like I don't really cry a lot when I read books. It's not like me trying to be hard, like super tough or anything. It's just, I just genuinely, it takes a lot for me to actually cry during a book, but Fool's Fate managed to do it. And so did Close was Fool's Errand. So I think with that, we can start talking about Fool's Errand. As Josh was mentioning, the first 200 pages of Fool's Errand is probably one of the things that it kind of seems like a lot of people are sort of divided on when it comes to how they like it. If they feel like it went on too long, they think Fool's Errand overall just is well paced or just the slower of books, and not a bad way. But for me, I loved it. I really enjoyed Lifestream Traders. It was so good to be back with Fitz that I just loved that first 200 pages. I had heard a warning from Jake specifically to say, he was saying don't read any of the backs of the books because they will just ruin your reading experience. So I think by doing that, I actually helped myself by not worrying about what the actual errand was going to be, and I could just enjoy that part of the book. But I guess what do you guys think of overall about Fool's Errand, but also just the first beginning part when we're with Fitz and Night Eyes and the Fool comes and we're with Hap and just catching up over the last 15 years?
It is my absolute favorite section of all of the books, and why Fool's Errand is my favorite of all of them. Because nowhere else in all of the saga do you actually get Fitz and the Fool just being friends. And to get that in that first 200 pages, the comfort they feel around each other, the contentment that they all feel just being around each other. We get to see Night Eyes gambling about like a puppy because he's so excited to see the return of Fool. And my heart just grew 5 sizes. It was such a beautiful little moment of Fitz's life that, I mean, it's Hobb. It's all going to go horribly wrong. But we got that time with them together where you can understand that, yes, this friendship is deep. And we get told about it a lot in earlier books, and it's clear after this book. But this is where we see it. This is where we see just how close these two people are. Well, 3 if you include Night Eyes, and I do. So you just see it. And I love it so very much, that whole section.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think my favorite part was it almost felt like the 15 years, almost like we lived it, even though, obviously we didn't. For me, it was a matter of months between the Farseer trilogy, but it almost felt like we know how it is when you have a great friend that you haven't seen for a while and you're just reunited. And that's what the whole beginning of that book felt to me. Not only just Fitz and the Fool reuniting, but I felt like I was reuniting with them as well, as a reader with these characters that I just enjoyed so much in the first trilogy. So I think all of that feeling for me is just what Hobb evoked, was what connected me to the beginning of that book. I remember I wrote a Goodreads, just a little update or whatever, and I said, I'm 200 pages in to Fool's Errand. The plot has moved absolutely nowhere, and I can't be happier.
I think I could sum up the first 200 pages of Fool's Errand by when I was done Ship of Destiny. Fitz was probably my 10th favorite Realm of the Elderlings character. I've gone back and first. I was wrong. It was a bad take. But at the time, that was my take. 200 pages into Fool's Errand, I was like, oh, he's probably going to end up being my favorite character of all time, isn't he? Also, we got like not grumpy, but like senior Night Eyes, older Night Eyes, who is just my favorite. That's like, if you actually ask me like, hey, why do you like Fool's Errand more than Fool's Fate? It's a 1-word answer, and it's Night Eyes. I love all the characters, but I think of all the amazing duos in Realm of the Elderlings, I might actually take like Fitz and Night Eyes as my favorite, and I think it's probably unquestionably at its best in Fool's Errand. I mean, it's pretty great in Assassin's Quest as well, but I like Fool's Errand is just like, I mean, it's kind of Night Eyes' book.
Yeah.
And Chade, we get Chade. I don't know if I've ever changed my opinion on a character, thinking of them like as a person more than Chade. I have gone from wanting to like punch this man in the face to being like, oh, give me a hug, Chade, probably 60 times. And a lot of those are in Tawny Man. And a few of them are in Fool's Errand. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally love the first 200 pages, especially because I think that she does a really good job of catching you up to the ways that Fitz is different from the person that you left off with in Assassin's Quest. Because obviously there's been, what is it, like 10, 12, I don't know exactly how long it's been between the ending of Assassin's Quest and the beginning of Fool's Errand.
15.
Has it been 15?
Yeah.
20 to 35 for his age-ish. Should just let Derry answer that.
Yeah.
No, it is 15. It does get stated.
It's 15.
Yeah.
So, he is a different person in a lot of ways. He's raised a son. He's, lived this kind of isolated life away from court politics and all this different stuff. And so in a lot of ways, he's quite a different person. And yet to his core, he kind of remains the same. And so you get to explore that relationship in those first 200 pages, which really establishes what's going to happen later in the books, because I think that this trilogy is kind of Robin Hobb's statement on friendship. Kind of like throughout the three books, kind of her I don't want to say thesis, but that's how it feels. She has something to say about friendship. So she has to establish this in order to kind of test the bounds of their relationship going forward. And it was just very masterfully done.
Also, just from like a writing perspective, in Farseer, like, you're all from Fitz's perspective. So I get into the trap, I think I and presumably other people get into when you read someone writing first person of like, oh, this is like how Hobb writes. And then you come directly from Live Ship. And I don't notice as much when I went from like Farseer to Live Ship. But when I go from Live Ship back to Fitz, I'm like, no, that's how Fitz thinks. That's not how Hobb writes. That's just how Fitz sees the world. And just from like a appreciating craft perspective, that's just one of the other reasons you should not skip Live Ship.
Absolutely.
Add it to the other 600. So
no, that's a good point. That's what I remember, actually, Alex. I remember your review of Farseer was fantastic. If you haven't seen his review of Farseer, it's one of the best I've seen. But he talked about that in particular, just the perspective of, we think we know these characters, but we only know them from the lens of Fitz. And that's a lot different. Seeing it from that lens, we think we know, but we're just looking at it from Fitz's perspective. So we know, but we don't really know those characters quite as well. And I think that is a really good point that Hobb does so well there at illustrating that.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, it's interesting because even in first person, when you're reading the Fitz books, very frequently I just forgot I'm reading first. I forgot I was reading first person, and it read like in my head I was reading a third person book, just a normal tense, and then I'd have to remind myself, oh, this is in first person. I'm like seeing everything through Fitz's eyes. So that was really cool. There wasn't a comment earlier that Emily brought up about Fitzbull and Night Eyes Trinity. I think in the beginning of, Assassin's Quest, we saw the bond between, or Assassin's Quest Royal Assass, we saw the bond between Night Eyes and Fitz really develop. And then here, seeing Night Eyes much older, it was pretty emotional, but still he wore the 15 years outwardly and inwardly. There's a scene at the beginning of at Fool's Errand where Night Eyes is choking.
Oh, God, it's horrible.
Yeah, and Fitz skills into him or uses skills into Night Eyes, and then the Fool comes in, and that whole scene with those three basically just trying to save each other from just this innocent.
That was anxiety inducing, Alex. That was I let out a breath.
I was like, what is going on?
I was holding. Okay.
Nice.
Yes. Very tension inducing. And because we've only just finished being in Fitz's head as he's thinking, has the wolf stolen some of my years to live longer? I don't begrudge it if that's the case. I would give him more. We've just had that thought process from Fitz. We've just had his acceptance that, no, however long I've got Night Eyes, I want it to be longer, even if it means that I die sooner. So then we get this scene and we get Night Eyes' horror that he could do that. And you're reminded that, oh, that's right, we're just in Fitz's head.
And
He
then
doesn't
Fitz
have a
in the
handle
same
on
thing,
what
like, when
everybody
he
else
gets kind
thinks.
then he gets
Yeah.
skill healed in
Yeah.
Golden Fool, and he's like, "Oh yeah, okay, yeah,
Oh, I get it now.
yeah, all right, fair enough." So Night Eyes, I love Night Eyes when Fitz is like, "Oh, I'm old." Night Eyes is like, "Shut up." Reminds me of, because I've had two coworkers at work, and one was like, in his 30s, and one was like, early 70s, and the guy in his like late 30s was like, "Oh, I'm getting old," and the guy in his 70s was like, "Boy, I have shirts older than you." And that reminds me of Night Eyes and Fool's Errand, where Fitz is like, "Oh, I'm getting old," and Night Eyes is like, "You're 35, shut up."
Yeah.
That's like, you're not even like halfway through your life expectancy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm the equivalent of 110 as a wolf. Like, get out of here.
But it feels more like a partnership in Fool's Errand, where
Yeah.
in Farseer it was very much Night Eyes was young, and it wasn't until quite close to the end of the book that he's an adult wolf. Whereas in Fool's Errand, they're a partnership. They both respect each other's talents. They give each other that credit of, I don't know what I'm doing, what do you think? And it comes across so loudly. It's just so well written.
And Derry, maybe I've got this wrong because it's been a while since I've read this trilogy. But don't they, between the Life Ship books or whatever the Assassin's Quest is and this one, doesn't he and Night Eyes go to live amongst the Witted for a little bit
Yes.
and kind of get some training?
Yes.
Yeah, and that kind of shows true as well,
We
that the
do.
relationship feels a bit more respectful and there's more boundaries being set, even though Fitz still violates them because he's a dumbass. But yeah.
Although my favorite part of that is
yes, he does.
Yeah. The Witted were just like
Oh, Fitz.
insisting that Night Eyes has like a wolf style like den inside the cottage when they were there, and then they left, and Night Eyes was just like, "No, screw that. I want to be by the campfire. Like I have a bed in here, and you want me to like go sleep on the dirt? No,
Be in a hole? No. Yeah. Yeah. But that moment that you're referring to, Chris, it happened as sort of the epilogue bit at Assassin's Quest, where they went back and spent time with the Witted. Rolf had been telling them, "You're too closely entwined. There's too much of him in you. There's too much of you in him." And I think that goes all the way back to the end of Royal Assassin and the beginning of Assassin's Quest, where they were one entity. And I use this metaphor a lot. It's like having two glasses, one of water, one of juice, putting some orange juice in the water till that's empty and then pouring it back. Both glasses now have water and orange juice. You can't just put the orange juice back in the glass. And that's how I felt that from that moment, they're literally one person in two bodies. That's why Night Eyes is so very humanly intelligent, and it's why Fitz reacts in not always smart ways, because
what could
instinct
possibly
is
go
a big
wrong?
part of him.
That's Fitz's yearbook quote.
Immediate
what could possibly
instinct.
go wrong?
Yeah. So I firmly believe that.
So with Tawny Man, I think one of my favorite parts about this trilogy overall, but it comes right in the beginning of Fool's Errand, is just how the parallels between Farseer and Tawny Man, but in slightly different ways when it comes to the relationships between Fitz and the people around him. So whether it's the father figures that he had in Farseer and how that translates to how he takes care of Hap, and then Dutiful when we meet him, and when the errand comes, when we find out that Dutiful is missing. And that was just something that throughout the entire trilogy, whether it was Chade or even just Burrich or anyone, it was very interesting to see how it just, like, sometimes it felt like Fitz was just subconsciously mirroring what, someone like Chade would act towards him in Farseer and stuff like that in a lot of different situations. I don't know if anyone had anything to say about those relationships.
It's thematic. It's Fool's cycle of time and everything repeating. And that if you're in a bad cycle, it's just going to continue until something happens to deliberately shift that cycle, which is what he's using Fitz to do on a grand scale. But we're seeing it reflected in all of the small ongoing relationships through all of the books. And most obviously, it's the fathers and sons that we're seeing, and these mentors, father figures, and young boys. And it's all repeating the same mistakes. You know, it's the rebellion and the conflict, and they're all the same conflicts because they're all doing what they learned. They haven't actually changed any of those reactions. So it's hugely thematic. That whole
Speaking
situation.
of the fathers and children thing, can we just say like Fitz is like family situation? So he's got two biological kids, one of whom he thinks of as their kid, but they don't think of him as his dad. That's Nettle. He's got another biological kid who he does not think of as his kid, and they do not think of him as his kid. And then he has a non-biological kid who he thinks of as his kid, and they think of him as his dad. Yeah. Like, man's got a
very
straightforward diagram of those family relationships.
It's a strange Venn diagram for sure. It's
Also, like, so I've only read Farseer once, and I noticed, like, you know, obviously Fitz sometimes the way he thinks has some frustrating tendencies. And I was reading Assassin's Apprentice where he's like, you know, actually doing the Assassin Apprentice part. The 10% of that book that actually fits the title. And Chade is like clearly conditioning him. And I'm like, damn it, Chade, half those frustrating like ways he thinks, you implanted that in him. Damn it. That was you. Brainwashed the 6-year-old. What do you expect?
What do you guys think of Chade? Like, I guess
I hate him and love him
and Tawny Man.
Want him to die and think he's precious and think he sucks.
No, I think that's valid. I think my experience with Chade's the same way, and it continues later, you know, beyond this trilogy. It's just, he's one of those where at times I adore him. I adore him as a character. There's the times I adore him, and there are times I loathe him and hate him. And he puts Fitz through so much, but you also feel that he's trying to do right by him, and it's definitely a tangled web we weave there.
And like, he was also as a kid conditioned to like always put the needs of the kingdom before his own personal needs and like the personal needs of others. Like I get mad at Chade for like basically conditioning Fitz to think in certain ways, but he was conditioned as a child to think in the ways that caused him to condition Fitz to think in certain ways. Yeah. So it's like his frustrating tendencies are also like, I mean, I see why you think like that, but like also, can you go step on a Lego brick? Like, dude.
He's definitely a frustrating character, without a doubt.
Yeah. He's my favorite kind of like mentor character in all of fantasy because I don't think you oftentimes get a mentor figure that's as complex or as damaged or as kind of a piece of shit as you get with Chade, because oftentimes they're kind of much wiser, all this different stuff. And in a lot of ways, Chade is a lot more wiser than Fitz, but he's also quite bitter. He has a lot of resentment that he keeps buried underneath that comes out, and he's much more emotional around Fitz than he is around other people, which can kind of almost veer towards abusive at times. So I love him as a character, and I like the fact that she really went there with her mentor figure.
It's unusual too, because Chade lives, and almost all fantasy, the mentor figure dies in order for our hero, our protagonist, to reach their, he's
going to die in
potential. And this is it, and he doesn't. So unlike a lot of mentor trope stories, Fitz has him as a young man. He's learning from him, looking up to him, admiring him. But then as an adult, he's encountering Chade and seeing his flaws and recognizing that he has been, as Jake says, conditioned. He's recognizing that he was a tool for this person. And we don't often get that in fantasy. We don't see the shift in that dynamic. And being able to read that is fascinating, because all of the skills that Shade taught him as a child, Fitz can now use to look at him and go, you're pulling strings for the sake of it. You know, you're manipulating because you're having fun, not for any particular, you know, output reason that's going to benefit anybody. You just can't help yourself. So the intelligence of being able to see that shift in the dynamic and how that relationship changes from, you know, my boy and the master to a friendship that recognizes each other's flaws was really well done, because there is still that affection, even as they recognize that you maybe shouldn't have done that to me.
Also, the Shade scene in Farseer when he gets to Buckkeep and like Fitz talking to Dutiful, and Jade is like kind of sorrowful about how Fitz just like can't let himself trust anyone, and it's just like because normally I know I actually think Fitz is one of the only people who
do you trust anyone?
Yeah, and you know Fitz,
and he's like, I trust Night Eyes.
Yeah, he does. He trusts Night Eyes.
That's it.
Fair enough.
And you see how it hurt for Shade, and you're like, well, do you blame him? Come on.
You know what? I trust Night Eyes too. So.
Oh yeah.
So I guess like I was gonna say, if you like talk about when he comes to Buck, and this is where the actual meat of the book starts. So the actual plot is about 250 pages in. We find out Prince Dutiful is missing, and he seeks out, tries to look for Dutiful. And this brings up the whole plot, which I actually thought was going to be the main confrontation or the main battles going on in the Tawny Man Trilogy, which is between the Piebalds and those who hate the Witted, and then the Witted that don't sympathize with the Piebalds, but also like, I don't know, that whole scenario I thought was very well done. I thought it was going to go way farther than just basically Fool's Errand and half of Golden Fool. But I loved it. And I did read Willful Princess and Piebald Prince right before, which I thought did make it a lot more just straightforward in terms of understanding what the Piebalds were and the history of them. I just thought it added a lot of layers to that. But
I still haven't read that.
Oh, you should.
Really?
I love Piebald Prince. I think it's phenomenal.
Great.
Yeah. I always just forget about it, that it even exists.
Yeah,
it exists, and it's well worth it.
Not only is it really good, also Hobb manages to like make life harder for Fitz in a book that's written generations before Fitz even lives. So that's pretty impressive. But also it's just like, it's a pretty stellar novella.
It is.
And I love, so Fool's Errand is like, Fool's Errand is one of the Hobb books where it's just like, you know, if someone was even like play devil's advocate, criticize Fool's Errand, I'd be like, I have to find a flaw in this. Like, it's the one where I'm like almost the least able to come up with anything that I would even consider criticism. Like, you know, people are like, oh, the first 200 pages. I'm like, I think the first like 500 pages. How long is this book? 520? I think the first 520 pages are pretty magnificent.
Pretty exceptional.
Maybe the first 200 and the last 100, and then like
and then
the
that
middle
200 in the middle
as well.
So the further I go after, because it's been a long time since I read it for the first time, is the plot is almost completely irrelevant to me now for what's in that book, because it's such a great, what's the word I'm looking for? Portrait of the characters, because you're getting all of them as these newly mature people, the people who were young in our first trilogy. You're getting Ketrican as a woman who is strong and has been queen for over a decade. She's found her strength, she's found her place, and this is who she is as an adult, and her relationships with the people around her. You see Shade, who's no longer hidden in the walls, so he's who he actually is. And you've got Lord Golden, who we get as Fool. And so we see other facets to his personality, their personality. And Fitz having real struggle to accept the changes in these people, because he's like, can you not just be how I know you? And they're all like, no, this is who we are now. Deal. And that the changes in how all of those individual relationships have evolved are, for me, the meat of Fool's Errand, in that he just completely has to reassess his relationships with everybody. And we learn how damaged Farseer made him. We see his PTSD. We see his depression. We see his mental struggles and how it affects him every day. His quickness to anger, the fact that strangers get frightened by him really quickly because he does react so immediately with force. And those aren't healthy things, but we know where they come from. So it's masterful character writing, which I think
I love like kind of the slight bitterness, because I think at one point he would have been like, oh yeah, living like in the wilderness, like with Night Eyes, that sounds pretty great. And then he has to come back and see like all these people who we know lived a life like without him, and he's just kind of been doing the same thing for 10 years, and to see all these people who like he was really close with have been like progressing, it's like obviously he's not like, you know, wishing that they would fail to progress, but it's kind of you know, I think maybe a barren of lost time. And also, you know, he put some of his pain into a dragon, and that can be not a good idea.
Any bit.
Scene for that in Fool's Errand where they have like the captive, like the piebald captive, and he's like, oh crap, I'm gonna like have to kill him, and then he keeps being like, oh wait, then I'll have to like kill this person and this person. I'm like, wait a second, that sounds like how Kenneth thinks.
Yeah, just back up a bit. Just
can we like hold up, pause.
Yeah.
You know, there's two things thematically that I think about a lot with that book, and the first one is just the question that Fitz is asking himself constantly is, have I, because of what I did in Farseer, have I earned this recluse status, or am I running away from it? And I love how Hobb just paints that theme into so much of what Fitz is doing in his inner dialogue, just thinking about it so much, because I thought about it so much through that book and throughout the entire trilogy, and I continue to think about that. That's one of the themes I think about a lot from that is, did he earn this? I mean, we think about everything that he went through in Farseer, and the answer is kind of yes, but he's also kind of running away from it as well. And I just love that, because it's something that I love books like this that just make me continue to think about them. And that was one of the main things that really got me was, is he running? Did he deserve it? And the other part of it as well is, I think because I don't know why, but for some reason, Farseer, the way that it was written, you almost don't dwell so much on all the trauma that he went through until you read Tawny Man. And I don't know how she did that so well. It's so skillful.
So like, I think if you can serve for the series, like he's kind of like, did I deserve to run away? But I think through Tawny Man, like he manages to make himself stop running away from trying to progress his life. After like Farseer, so many horrible things happened. He really just ended up somewhere very static. Like he just got into a place where it's like, okay, nothing can go catastrophe. Like just avoid catastrophe. And over Tawny Man, like he comes back and he sees everyone like making progress in their life. And by the end, you get like his arc of now he's actually like actively building a life and, you know, running into situations that could lead risk, but kind of deciding that's worth it. Yeah. And not running from just like, you know, more catastrophe happen, which it's hard to blame guy. Cause I mean, you know, rough time and Farseer, like
he did. I mean, we get lots of reasons for that as well, because trauma affects people in a certain way, and then we add the fact that he put so much of that immediacy of that pain into Girl on a Dragon, and those two things together I think have a lot to do with the difference between Farseer and Tawny Man. But trauma in itself, while you're in it, you don't know you're in it. You're just getting to the next stage. You're just getting to the next thing you have to do to survive the moment. It's only much later when you're looking back, as we know Fitz is doing through his writing, which is a form of therapy, a well-established form of therapy, that he's come to terms with the fact that I went through a lot and I still have to process this. So you're getting sort of the therapy, the aftermath of Farseer with a lot of the epigraphs that you get all through Tawny Man. is Fitz working through that trauma and going, oh, okay, that's why I do this. That's what made me behave that way. And he still hasn't got a grip on it necessarily, but he's certainly now recognizing that it exists, that he is carrying this depression and this PTSD that he just didn't have time for when it was happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a lot.
I would like to note at this point that Assassin's Quest was, for Night Eyes, a relatively happy ending, and he basically lived a fulfilling, happy life up until
totally did.
Fool's Errand and many walks. He went on many walks.
He did.
Yes, just wanted to note that.
Yes, he did.
So they find Dutiful. They find him and Chade and I think Laurel is the other one who's with them.
Yeah.
And they find Dutiful, and he pretty quickly realizes that Dutiful is not only witted, I think he might have known that before, but he is very interested in learning more about the wit. And you start learning way more. He has this fascination with the wit, and Fitz right away is very cautious about how to handle that. He doesn't really know how to handle it because from his own experience, it's kind of that parallel that we were talking about earlier between how Birch and Chade handled it, or how Birch handled it when he was a kid. And I just thought that was so interesting. And that's why one of the other elements of Fool's Errand that I think is so good, we learn so much more, or we see so much more of the wit in reality, in practice, in the real world, outside of just Fitz and Night Eyes or Fitz and the Farseer characters. So I thought that was really well done. And it leads us to some really emotional chapters that come back to back to back. But there is a big fight. Fitz and Dutiful end up on Other's Island from the live ship traders, which for me, I remember messaging right in the Discord and just freaking out because I was just like,
are they there?
I was like, wait, I know this place. And so that was awesome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another reason why not to skip live ship. And so I guess from just in Fool's Errand in that section, what do you guys think of the relationship between Fitz and Dutiful when they first really are together in Fool's Errand?
I like it a lot because I think that in a lot of ways, Dutiful is what Fitz would have been had Fitz been acknowledged.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he has a lot of the same tendencies, but they're kind of allowed to go on because of the fact that he's the prince. But he's also resists the kind of duties that are put on him as well. So I really like it. And it's also really interesting to look at his relationship with the cat and the name of the cat. I've already forgotten. The one that's not really a cat, but being possessed by this woman. And it's quite interesting because
her name.
Yeah, because in a lot of ways, Fitz is oftentimes told to break off relationships with the animals that he was trying to bond with when he was young. But oftentimes those were innocent relationships where neither party was like trying to deceive the other, but they were relationships they were too young for. Whereas this case, Fitz has like a really good reason to try and get this kid to like stop bonding with this cat, and he's running up against the same kind of problems that the same reasons why Fitz wouldn't give up his bonds. So it's really interesting to see like Fitz kind of have to take on Burridge's role a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really love their relationship, and I like how angry Dutiful is, and how petulant, and also how well she writes a 15-year-old.
To be fair, like on Other's Island, Fitz is not like Fitz is kind of a dick. Like if you were reading this from Dutiful's perspective, you'd be like, "This guy sucks." Like,
wasn't good.
Also, when they leave through like the pillar, and they leave the Fool and Night Eyes, that was like gut punch number one, and I'm sure it'll all be happy for the rest of the book after this, so I can recover properly. But
that's where the book ends.
No, it's all happy after that. That's actually the rest of the realm of the Elderlings is like, no, everyone is okay. It's all fine.
Yeah. One big happy family. But I mean, that does bring us to, or Derry, do you want to say something?
I was going to say that talking earlier about the cycles of parenting and the mistakes that parents are making for their children. Dutiful doesn't have a father figure and is being parented solely by Kettricken. Of all of the children of this generation. He's the one that's breaking the mold. This cycle isn't going to continue through Dutiful. And I like that. I like that we get to see that Fitz's existence has led to a shift in that pattern, has led to a shift in that cycle. And it just leans really into the Fool's wish for the world, is to not repeat these cycles. And, you know, Fitz managed to achieve that by accident, like he always does. So.
Well, that brings us to chapter 26, which is where Night Eyes, you know, they...
Possibly the most beautiful scene I've ever read.
Well,
Yeah, I would say it's
but
easily
I always
the
have to
most
run ahead and show you the
emotional
way.
one.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's completely devastating.
How it's done with the dream, like how he brings
Yeah.
it to the hill. There was like a glimmer of hope there for a second, and then I was just like, no, this is it. It was like,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
spoke
that was
to
bad.
Joanna Sousa just a few days ago, and she was in chapter, I think, 23, and she was like, oh, I've got the rest to read. And I said, can you just make sure that from here you finish and you allow yourself recovery time? And she looked at me and I said, just please trust me. You're going to not want to have anything planned. Just stay home, eat chocolate, and recover. You're going to need to recover. And, you know, sort of 18 hours later, I get the Voxer message. And she's like, I hate this book. It's 5 stars and I hate it. And I was like, I couldn't warn you. You can't be warned for that, because the beauty of it is lost if you know it's coming.
Yeah.
And it is so beautiful that you need to go in cold and feel the beauty of it. Otherwise, it's just too tragic. And yeah.
Yeah, first
I
time I
still
read
can't even talk about it properly. And I've read it like 22, 23 times now. It's emotional.
Yeah, my dog was quite old when I was reading it, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go through this soon.
Oh my
It
God.
was the first time I read it. I
Oh,
was just
no.
like, oh, this is the worst. Yeah, I was just like bawling my eyes out. It's a completely devastating scene. It's probably, I think that's actually, even though like probably more scenes are more violent or upsetting, I think that's probably the saddest scene of the whole series.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there are
Also
people
felt
like,
like-
oh, it's been a week and I'm not okay. And I'm like, oh, it's been like
Yeah.
a year and a half and I'm not okay. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derry, what's the
It's
year
always-
counter of not okay? What are we at?
What's the year now? 2022. So it's 21 years. It's still too soon.
Wow.
It will always be too soon.
Wow.
Too soon.
Always.
'Cause
He lives
It's interesting
in my
because
heart.
it did, it felt, not that I predicted it was going to happen. I actually, like, I had a feeling it was going to happen in the trilogy. I was shocked it happened in the first book, but then looking back on it, I was like, so much of the book felt like Night Eyes was preparing
Yeah.
Fitz for life after that moment. And
Yeah.
so
And that's what
that,
makes it beautiful. is that
yeah, it
it
was
wasn't done for,
very emotional.
you know,
Yeah, I mean,
it wasn't done for, it's not a manipulative tactic. It's like, no, he's old and it's going to be his time soon. And that coincided with really stressful events. And it was time. Like it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel sort of shoehorned in for a bit of emotional manipulation. It was like, no, it was time. And we were ready for it to happen because we knew it was going to by that point. So when
it
it
seemed
did
like he had,
happen,
as a
there's an
wolf,
accept-
like Night Eyes had a whole life, but it's still destroyed.
Oh, yeah.
Like I knew I kind of knew Night Eyes was going in Tawny Man because math, and I was like, I'm pretty sure Fitz is going to be a good bit older than 35, and Fitz in the Fool, and Night Eyes is like what 17 right now, like
Yeah.
but I was kind of
Wouldn't do it
expecting in
off
Fool's
screen.
Fate,
Yeah.
and then it happened in Fool's Errand, and I was just like,
It's like, where does it go from here?
Yeah, well, pretty much. You're like, oh my God, there's how many more books to go? Can I survive this? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, you
It
know,
is
that's
beautiful.
that's like the big scene in the book that I think a lot of people connect with, that and the whole, you know, with Dutiful. But I think Night Eyes 100% is what everyone remembers when it comes to someone saying Fool's Errand. What's the first thing you think of? And I think for the rest of that book, from that point to the end of the book, there's things happening. We're setting up. We're going back to Buck. We find out that the Out Islands, the people from the Outer Islands, are here, and they Ketchikan plans to marry Dutiful to the Narcheska. And throughout this entire time, Fitz is like it happens.
numb.
It feels like it happens, but there's a numb feeling as you're reading it, and even as you're watching Fitz experience it right after the whole thing. And it's just very, I don't know, realistic, but
And then he has to keep telling people that Night Eyes is dead, because it's like,
Yes.
it's like every time then you run into someone, it's like you have to recap it, and every time it's like, every time it sucks.
Yeah.
For anyone who's
And somehow
lost
Hobb
somebody.
makes us all
and
feel
that's
like-
every time it sucks for like
Saying
real
the
life
words.
and for Fitz with Night Eyes. Yeah.
Saying the words makes it real all over again. And it was
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to pretty much the setup for Golden Fool. Does anyone have anything else to say about Fool's Errand? We can start going into middle book.
not really.
All right. Well, I think Golden Fool, my expectations going into it were just general from what I've heard. People were like, it just seems like the general consensus was it's a middle book. It's the most middle book feeling book that Hobb has written up to that point in the Realm of the Elderlings. And so that's what I was expecting, not in a bad way, but I was just bracing myself like it's not going to be a one and done.
4-star
book
meat
like
read.
Fool.
So
Yeah. And I loved it. I thought it
so
was
good.
just, I thought it was
It is,
so
it's
good.
fantastic.
I really, oh my God. Just everything
there are
about King and
scenes
Buck.
in it.
Yeah.
Oh,
The Fitz and
And
the Fool
the-
scenes, I thought in a lot of
Yeah.
ways it was Fool's book and Fool's
It
Fate, but
was.
this,
we
Yeah.
learned a lot.
It is the
It's-
full book.
yeah.
A lot of them were little like Fitz seeing Lady Patience for the first time in
Yes.
sort of 16, 17 years. And she's unaware he's there. And just the joy he feels at seeing her. And just beautiful.
I think my favorite aspect of this book is the big kind of, the kind of driving tension of it is the fight that breaks out between Fitz and the Fool.
Yeah. The argument.
Yeah, the
capital
argument,
letters.
which is building and building throughout the book. I think it's completely brilliant. It's one of my favorite things she's ever done. And I know a lot of people don't like it because they think that Fitz is really terrible and they think all this different stuff. I completely disagree. I totally see Fitz's side. I like the one person that's like, no, the Fool was really wrong. I just absolutely love it. I love the fact that they have it out. I like everything about it.
I just think it's a beautiful
real.
representation of how much the people who love you can hurt you the most.
Yeah.
Because it matters what they say and what they think of you. And it was just written so beautifully because you see the damage they're doing to each other. You're like, oh, stop it, guys. Just please stop it. And they just can't. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, and the Fool has to maintain this Lord Golden persona the whole book, which is flippant and sarcastic. And Fitz is not a flippant or sarcastic person. He might be stoic at times or anything like that. He's an incredibly earnest person. And I think that it's the worst possible situation for the argument to happen under, because the Fool in so many situations has to intentionally wound him and stuff like that, and it's just really, really good. The tension of it is just ratcheted up.
No, it is. It's beautiful.
That's one aspect I love about their relationship of Fitz and the Fool. I love the relationship. How Fitz, when in this trilogy it's Lord Golden, it's a different relationship, and not to give spoilers away, but things happen later that you'll get to eventually, and it's the same sort of thing. And it just shows the complexity again that Hobb's able to infuse into these characters, that they do react differently when the Fool is in a different guise.
Yeah.
And then we also get to see the Fool as Amber in this book, because
we do the actual
Jake
reveal.
shows up with the
and Fitz is kind of like, wait, what is going on? And then I'm like, see, Fitz, you shouldn't have skipped live ship. I'm telling you.
That and we get Selden, and we get Selden Vestrit, and we get
yes.
a few
We get
live ship
Cirilla, and we
connections.
get
Guys. I was
some
so
of- yeah.
pumped when I saw that.
Also, shout out to the Ketrican scene where Fitz tells
the
Ketrican that
morning.
Night Eyes is dead. That's
But
one of
this
my
is the
favorite
thing.
scenes in this
He
book.
doesn't. He
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
tell her. She knows. She goes, I felt him go.
Yeah.
And then he has the
Say that.
conversation with like the fool, and it's like how like Ketrican's grief was like more because Ketrican was grieving for
Was
Night
grieving
Eyes.
For Night Eyes.
Yeah, while
Yeah.
Fool was grieving like felt bad for Fitz because Fitz had lost Night Eyes, and I'd like shout out Ketrican for being the MVP.
Oh,
Life,
hell
just
yeah.
of like of
Steals-
existence,
steals
not of this
everything.
book, just of like.
I
the
have
universe.
a challenge actually for all of you because I haven't found it yet. A scene where Ketrican makes a mistake. Just gonna leave that out there.
I mean, I was a bit
Because
mad at her in
she
Assassin's
doesn't
Quest
read.
where she was like, Fitz was like, just leave like Nettle out of this, and she was kind of like,
Yeah,
It's not
I
a
No.
agree.
mistake, though.
Yeah,
You know,
but it's
at that point,
frustrating.
she doesn't have an heir.
Yeah.
It's not a mistake. So,
I love
anyway, she doesn't read like a Mary Sue, and I was like, she should though because she doesn't. Screw
Oh,
up.
she does try and
Anyway,
poison
that's
Fitz.
Completely secondary.
She does try and
Yes.
poison Fitz in her first scene.
She does.
So there's that.
From where
Yeah.
she's coming from, that was the right move.
Okay, no, you should not poison people without making sure you have complete information. I'm not on this side. No,
Okay.
no,
okay.
it's not.
I'll give you that. Okay.
All right.
I love every interaction between Fitz and Ketrican. Every time they
Yes.
interact, I'm just like, now kiss. Like I want them to be
Yeah.
together so bad.
Thank
and
you.
I'm always
They're
upset
all-
that he ends up
Yes.
with Molly. I'm like,
Yes.
"No,
There was always a
Ketrican.
undertone between those two
I know.
in every scene that I
Yeah.
think that they've been in this
I
entire
know.
series
Yeah.
so far. But
It's written so
Yeah, I
well
felt that
too.
same way.
I fully
Yeah.
ship them, Chris. Fully.
Yeah.
Even after
Same.
all these years, I'm like,
I love
that,
them
that
together.
should have gone a different way. I mean, I'm glad it didn't because I love the way it does actually end. But I'm there with you.
Yeah.
So Emily's got me in the comments. Thank you, Emily.
yeah,
Ketrican's still goated though, but
Yeah.
So Golden Fool. I mean, a lot of this book is Fitz living without Night Eyes and starting this new phase in his life. He's the skill master for in Buck with Dutiful, and we also meet Thick for the first time. Pretty early, I think, in this book.
He's so great.
And
Yeah.
yeah, what do you guys think about Thick, just on a general level?
I
Love him.
Oh yeah, I think there are generally two camps. There are people who
Yeah,
really appreciate Thick and love his character, and there are people who are wrong. So
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a small
I was
camp,
like-
that one, I have to
Yeah.
say. But yeah, he's.
I loved
But
him, and
you read it just recently, Alex. Did you
Oh,
pick
yes.
up the first time you saw Thick when he says, "Don't see me"? Because Fitz sees him in the stable yard being bullied, and then doesn't register him again until he's up in Shade's chambers.
Mm.
oh well, no, I
And
didn't.
By the
and that's what Hobb is a genius at it. People complain that it's retconned, and I'm like, trust me, I've read it enough. Everything that she mentions later was in those earlier books. Trust me. And
there's a
that's
character
the
we
kind of
haven't
thing that
talked
she
about
does.
yet for Fool's Errand or Golden Fool, and that's Starling.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were
Oh
talking-
yeah.
Where I read the beginning of Fool's Errand and I was like, vindication, because I read Assassin's Quest and I was like, Starling has all these like red flags. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And some people were like, no, and I was like, yeah, totally. And then I read the start of Fool's Errand and I was like, I told you. I told all of you. Take that.
Hey,
But also,
I've
goddamn.
always had you on that. Always. I was like, no, you're right, Jake. You're right. This is
Yeah.
the correct way.
I liked it from the beginning, and in Discord, I remember someone asking me like, "What are your opinions of Thick?" And I was just like, I don't know, should I have any other than I enjoy his character? And then I started second guessing everything I had thought up to that point.
He's the hidden
but I
genius
just thought,
guy.
yeah, basically,
Yeah,
I just
you
thought
gotta-
that he was
He's
just
lovely.
just so well written for his character. You know, like how he impacts Fitz and the story overall. and I just thought he was just probably one of the best written new characters that we've seen since Farseer, if not the best. I can't name another one that I would say, but we do find out that he is like not purposely spying on Fitz and the Fool and just everyone else, and over some slices of cake, I think is what they're using to try to get him to spy.
Sweets.
Yeah, and that was at first I was like, oh, maybe he's bad, and then I was like, no, he's not bad. He's just like wants some cake, and then it just made me feel bad.
Yeah, and that's why that scene when Fitz just makes the conscious decision to go, I'm not doing this to manipulate Thick. I'm doing this because Thick deserves kindness. And that's that reminder that at heart, for all that Fitz can be angry and aggressive and quite a dangerous person to know, at heart, he's still that kid who likes people and just wants to have friends. And here's this little boy, ultimately, in a man's body, who wants to have friends and a whistle and a pink icing cake. And Fitz is like, I can do that for this person. And this person will be happy. And that's enough for them to just be happy. Whether that puts him on our side is secondary. I can do a thing to make him happy. And I love that.
But also, not to be like the cynic, from a realpolitik perspective, though, it does remind me a bit of why there's a scene in Farseer when Shrewd is talking about why it's important to keep Fitz kind of by their side. He makes the deal, right? And it's because Fitz could be a weapon against them. And in the same way, you see it kind of reflected in Thick as well. The most kind of one of the most vulnerable people in the castle can be so easily twisted against the wrong side because they're desperate.
And Shade says it out loud.
Yeah.
He said, well, do you think we should kill him?
Yeah.
Because we can't necessarily control him. And the thought of that being utterly abhorrent is like, whoa, no. Well, we have to do something to control him then, because we can't let this just be. So, it's a very deliberate callback to exactly that theme.
Yeah. So I really love Thick's character, and I think that he's fantastic. And I like the way the relationship grows. And, Thick can be a nuisance for Fitz, but he's never mean-spirited, which I love about him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, all the information that Thick is not purposely is giving away leads to basically Fitz not solving, but basically what I thought was going to be the major confrontation of the entire trilogy between the Piebalds and that whole thing kind of wraps up in the middle of Golden Fool in a way when he goes out to save Civil and finds himself in the dungeon, and after that big fight that comes out right
and
there.
the city
and
guards come and they hold him in a cell, mortally injured.
And of course, this is one
that's
where
heartbreaking because he's left there.
Oh, I know.
Because Chade is still in politics mode. He's like, oh no, if I save Fitz right away, then people
we've got
get
to have
suspicious about
it's got
it.
to be believable.
So it's he still wants to save Fitz, obviously, but it's on his list. He's like, we have to save Fitz, but we also have to maintain appearances,
save face.
Yeah. It has to look the right way. And Ketrican's no, we're just going to go and get him, and it gets overruled.
Jade gets his way
all the time. The whole
does.
Fitz is in this cell going, they haven't come to get me. They're going to let me die. And calling out for Night Hive, who isn't there. Just
it's
also
really devastating.
Shout out to the fact that Hobb does not have a lot of action scenes, and the action scenes that happen have consequences. I think without exception. I don't think there's a single action scene that you could trim out and it wouldn't actually
drastically alter it.
And this is a great example of that. Also, I just remember I was going to say this before, but we had the Fitz in the floor. That wasn't even the most frustrating thing Fitz did in this book was when Burrich was there, and I was like, Fitz, go talk to Burrich. I wasn't for the Fitz and the Fool, I was like both of you. I was like, I see where they're coming from, and I was just like, this hurts that they're fighting. For when Birch was there, I was like, I don't know if I was yelling at my book, but like internally, I was yelling at my book, like, no, Fitz, go talk to me.
See, I'm always conflicted because I'm like, I want you to talk to Burke, and I want Burke to know they're alive, but I know why you're not, because we know these characters. We know what Burke's going to feel if he knows Fitz is alive, and we know the guilt he's going to take, and how much damage that will do to Burke and to Molly, and by extension their family. So you're like, I get it, Fitz, I get it, but I just wish that you could. And so it's hurtful to read because you're like, oh, the hurt for both of you. And if you just knew, but you can't. And
on the plus side, at least when we do eventually get Fitz like telling Birch he's alive, we get an absolute banger of a scene.
Yeah.
So we get a really good scene out of Fitz being an idiot there in Fool's Fate when he's like, you know, tell Birch like I forget the exact line, and then when he gets back and Fitz is there and it's like, heart of the pack had never let us come to harm. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But for me, that moment comes when Nettle passes on the skill message because Swift has gone missing again, and he gets the dream message about the wolf with the porcupine quill, and you see the realization through Nettle's eyes. You see Burke register what that means and collapse, and just the horror in him when he says to Molly, "You don't know what we've done." And you're just like, oh, the hurt that this is causing him, and the decision of whether or not to share that information, and the tragedy of it. And then, as you say, Jake, when he does go to Aslev and sort of shows up, Fitz is hurt, he's vulnerable, and he just lets it go because Heart of the Pack is here. And I can relax. I can trust that somebody will look after me.
Is anyone just reading Golden Fool and just waiting for Fitz to like name drop himself, like in any of the arguments? You know, I was just waiting for Fitz to be like, and nope, doesn't do it. There's one, I forget his name. There's like one of the guards, like one of the Farseer guards. I should remember his name. Blade, yeah. And then a Farseer reread I noticed in Royal Assassin when Fitz is, you know, doing a little public murder. Blade is throughout the novel of Royal Assassin. Blade like begins to respect Fitz. They only have a few scenes you can interact, but like you can on reread. Like I noticed it because I know where this is going. And then Blade is actually the one who like knocks Fitz out in that confrontation, and was probably expecting them to just like, you know, for him to be in trouble and then come back and then. You know, obviously, from his perspective, he knocked out this kid who, like, I really respected, and that led to him being, like, tortured and killed.
Tortured brutally.
And then Fitz doesn't tell him he's alive, and he dies with that. Yes. And yeah, so I'm glad someone else wanted Fitz to name drop himself. Like, I knew it's like it wouldn't be in character for Fitz to be like, I'm Fitz Chivalry Farseer.
But still shows that support later.
I'm here.
When Webb shows up, Webb comes and he's eating in the guard kitchen, and people are like, I don't know about this wizard person. And Blade is the one that said, we used to be accepting of it because, you know, Fitz used to eat with us. So even though he thinks Fitz is gone, he's still defending him.
I love that scene. I completely forgot about that scene. So you just mentioned that.
Yeah, Blade is like, you know, he's probably in terms of like how relevant they are to the story in Realm of the Elderlings, like the 50th or something. Yeah. But you know, this is just my shout out to my man Blade. Really good character. Didn't let Fitz down, and he was done dirty
and stayed true to it.
Yeah, and ended up, you know, going by old age, probably still feeling some guilt for the part he played, and just want to shout out my man here because he earned it. He was a real one.
He really was. And it's this is why I mentioned to someone else lately that this discussion, Tawny Man, this trilogy needs a fair amount of time to talk about because it sort of integrates so much of the previous stories and gives you so much context for those earlier events, and the small aside things that you cannot notice. You know, Blade at the table defending Fitz. if you catch that, then you get that reward. Not everybody's going to catch that on one read. Some people will, because everyone notices more than just the basic plot when they go through. But they're all the way through Tawny Man. There are all of these little callbacks to moments that you may or may not have caught. And they're all there.
Yeah, and it's like, going
insane.
full, I could have been like, yeah, Blade had that good scene, but I wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, Blade was the guard who slowly grew to respect Fitz, the royal assassin, and then he was the one who like knocked him out. And that's gonna hit different when I reread Tawny Man, which
I was really annoyed with Jack in this book.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed with Jack in a lot of books.
Seriously, Jack, clearly he has no idea what you're talking about. Stop talking about it.
I mean, I was already, Ship of Destiny. I was like, come on, Jack. So Jack was already kind of on my shit list. And now I'm like, you're not making any progress here, Jack.
No.
Oh, you're not getting a shout out.
Not in a good way.
No.
Not in a good way.
No.
Well, that's a conversation where between Jack and Fool and that fits before where Fool is confirmed to be Amber, which did any of you not know that going into Tawny Man, or did you all pick up on that going through?
I picked up on it.
Yeah.
I have seen someone react to Fool's Errand having not noticing it, and everyone was like waiting for them to notice it.
Yes.
And then it was when the Fool was like the horse's name Malta.
Malta.
They were like, wait,
that
what?
was like right on the it's like very on the nose.
Yeah, and then I think Fitz recalls a scene in Fool's Errand like where he did skilling, and it actually it impacted something in Ship of Destiny. Derry probably knows exactly.
Yeah, I do. Amber's left on the deck with Lavoy, who hates her and wants to kill her, and instead he goes and gets Brashen because she's out cold and goes for help instead of killing her.
Thank you. I knew something like that happened. And
Fitz had repelled Lavoy from afar.
Yeah. So I only vaguely remember these things. So for now on, I'm just going to start my thoughts, and then I'm going to be like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Derry, I'm passing over to you.
But that leads to the big confrontation between Fitz and the Fool, which has been building and building throughout this entire book, and probably even before then too. It's something that has kind of always been an undercurrent. And I would be very curious, Chris, to hear your thoughts, because a lot of people do say that Fitz is wrong, Fitz is wrong completely in the situation. He shouldn't have done that. He should have just he's treating Fool so poorly and so on. So, what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I don't think that Fitz necessarily reacts to it the best way, but I think that people underestimate what the Fool has done. I'm trying to say, because the Fitz has an idea of what their relationship is, what their boundaries are, how they feel about each other, and it seems to Fitz, and obviously it has been exposed to other people that this feeling feels more romantic for the Fool. I mean, the whole point of she tells people in the live ships that this was her previous love. When she carves the face onto Paragon, it is a betrayal. I mean, as maybe it's not a mean-spirited betrayal, but it is a betrayal. And to not have Fitz be aware of that or anything like that, I just think it's completely normal to react as negatively as he did. And it's like the one justifiable anger I feel like you can have towards the Fool is this, which is just a deep betrayal, even though the Fool has his own sense of logic about why he's done it.
Yeah,
it's just a really big omission, really.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
I'm glad I'm not
Fitz
the only
is
one
right to feel angry about it. I think where I stop feeling sympathy for Fitz is when, once he realizes that Fool has been going around as a female, he still thinks of Fool as a man. So with all of his intrigue background, surely there's a point in his brain that goes, they're behaving like a woman and using trinkets from me. So how else do you describe that relationship? It's going to be romantic. the thing that gets me is that Phil doesn't take the opportunity to say, oh, I need a quick word. These people are here and they're going to tell you some things. So I'm just going to tell you first. So sit down because, yeah. And at least give him a heads up about what was about to happen. And he didn't. Not even for 5 minutes when he first arrives. Jack's in the room. Amber could have gone, Jack, I need a minute. Come back tomorrow.
Or in like 10 months or whatever, Jack.
Socially, Lord Goldberg,
especially because
or Amber has the upper hand with Jack, and they didn't. And that's the point in which I'm like, you carry some of the blame here because you could have lit that situation for him, and you didn't. So,
yeah, it's like he also knows. I mean, the Fool knows Fitz probably extremely well and would have probably been able to predict how Fitz was going to react to this extremely well leading up to it. So yeah, you're right. It's like, why wouldn't that have happened naturally?
Surely.
Want to be like, hey, give me, an hour just to talk to Fitz.
Come back tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's going to be really grumpy with me, but it's better coming from me. And it just doesn't take that opportunity. So, but they're also both, they want to be able to trust each other. And so they both go, no, I'm going to trust they're going to react the way I want them to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this kind of thing is why Fitz only trusts Night Eyes.
It's not going to go that way. And yeah, it's hard to read. But yeah.
Do any of you feel that since Night Eyes was gone, like his relationship with the Fool almost became more, he became like, started paying attention to it more than he had previously?
Yes.
Or
yeah, he's far more conscious.
Yeah,
of the ties that they share, because Night Eyes isn't there as the more in your face relationship for Fitz to deal with, and so it hurts more because this is probably the first real emotion he's had since losing Night Eyes, and it's going to feel worse than it is because just is. You're already vulnerable. You're already down, and so this is very much a kick while you're down, which is really, really sad.
Yeah. This scene and the.
No, I think it's again. It just goes to show how well Hobb realistically portrays relationships, because in this scene we see, as we're sitting here talking, we're seeing how both parties could have handled things so much differently, and it wouldn't have turned into this huge fight and this huge gulf between the two of them. That she's able to do that. And I know when I first read it, I thought Fitz was 100% incorrect, and then I thought about it more, and like you said, Derry, the Fool could have handled it a little differently. So again, it's just the realism that she portrays in the characters and their relationships is just so masterful, because we've all been there. We've had arguments that shouldn't have been arguments with people we love.
Yeah, and you always say the wrong thing, always, when it's someone you care about.
But you figure out the right thing like 2 hours later.
Much later, after you've inflicted the damage, basically. But my favorite quote of the whole series comes in that argument where Fool turns around and he's like, love is more than plumbing. And that's such a fundamental aspect of the books, that love is more than plumbing. You've got all different kinds of love that we see in this series. And ultimately, love is not defined by sex or any kind of sexual interaction, because we see that between not loving people, and we see that a lack of sexual intercourse between people who genuinely care for each other. Love is way more than plumbing. Also,
the Fool thought about it, and 2 hours later came up with the best way of phrasing it, because then at the end of the book, might have even been, I don't know, later in the series, he's like, would you say you love Night Eyes without reserve? And Fitz is like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. So, the Fool was probably, 3 hours later was like, I should have phrased it like that.
Yeah. And I just love that. I really do. because that is at the crux of it. Because he said, I would never have asked that of you because I know you're not okay with that. And we didn't have to say that out loud. And now we both have to remember it.
Yeah. And it also goes
the
on
truth
to
of that. Oh,
yeah, it makes everything in Fool's Fate hit
so
even
much
harder
more.
than it than it would have. But I think that relationship between Fitz and the Fool, especially in Golden Fool, is why if someone said Golden Fool is their favorite book in Tawny Man, I wouldn't doubt. Like I wouldn't say no, it shouldn't be, because I think it's some of the best scenes in the trilogy. Some of my favorite scenes so far were between Fitz and the Fool, and like some of basically every single thing the Fool was saying in this book was like poetry. Like he always talks very poetically, but I thought in this book it was like I was highlighting with every other line. Like I was reading on my Kindle, and every other line was like highlighting. I was just like, I've never used this feature that much.
But it is like that, you know. Yeah. And we still haven't we haven't touched on full Fitz's healing and the way that just completely throws everything into chaos, because they kind of didn't know what they were doing, and what they were doing got away from them. And Fitz's horror with it, and how that impacted all of the relationships, because Ketrican at this point decides, he was going to die. I'm telling my son the truth. He needs to know what this person has sacrificed to put him on the throne. And she just took that decision from Jade, which was a powerful moment for her, which gave dutiful power, which changes that dynamic massively. Again, Fitz being the catalyst without even needing to do anything. You know, he's literally just lying there dying.
You're the advisor, sir. You give advice, and then if Ketrican's like, I think your advice sucks,
I'm not going to
shut it. Okay? Yeah. We got enough.
So we get all of those. It's remarkable.
Yeah, I think as we were talking about Jade earlier, this is the book I think before, not Fool's Errand didn't really do it, but this is the book where I started second guessing Jade, like, and his behavior. And towards the end of the book, he starts becoming very obsessed with the skill, and he starts, you know, Fitz is like telling him, "Hey, you can't do this; it's dangerous." And you know, Jade is just obsessed with it, and those scenes frustrated me a lot. Like I was very frustrated at Jade. I just wanted to tell him to stop. Go back and read
Assassin's Apprentice and be like, "Oh, Jade was actually kind of obsessed with the skill back then, and Fitz didn't notice."
Yeah, exactly.
He has about a lot.
And yet that obsessiveness is built in. You accept that because you're like, yes, we've seen that in Shade before. We know that's how he's going to be with this.
Well, I mean, Fitz is just kind of like, oh, he needs to know this just because like he knows information. Fitz doesn't put together that like he's personally like kind of obsessed with the skill.
Yeah. And then he starts to be leaning on Thick for it, and that's when Fitz has to say no. Now you're affecting the realm because Thick is our strongest skill member, and what you're doing could damage that. So no. Which I think is the first time he actually has to use any kind of seniority over Shade on anything. And Shade does not like it at all, one little bit.
Yep.
Not a fan of that.
And like Wendy, the plot that's on the back of the book of Golden Fool, where they're like, oh, they need to go slay Icefire, which
we haven't actually talked about
that. That's still to come.
Yeah, that's so I was on page 300 or 350 of the Golden Fool, and I was like, surely I can read the back of the book now. The back of the book is like, they're gonna go kill Icefire, and I'm like,
what?
What is that?
Who signed off on that?
I'm like, did I miss something? Like,
yeah.
Then, to be fair,
because it's like,
what would you put there? What do you put on the back of the
how about Fitz is returning to
Buckkeep? Quotes.
And you know, has embraced, you know, political stuff. I don't know, not something that's 400 pages into the book.
It's like, what is the event that happens
bad
in
at writing
this book
summaries
that we
generally.
can talk about?
I'm bad at doing summaries generally. I'm struggle with any book where writing the back was really easy. But you
Fitz has feelings and offends lots of people.
could write
There you go.
Fitz, has been isolated from politics for a decade and a half, but now is returning to Buckkeep and must deal with like personal relationships. And a grief-stricken Fitz must deal with personal relationships while juggling various political forces. You don't have to mention that they're gonna go kill a dragon. That happens on page 400.
Yeah.
I have not read a back of a book that I wasn't completely done since then. And I haven't, and I've only read a couple of them, and I found one that's even worse, by the way, Wall of Storms. I obviously can't say what's on it, but that back in the book is even worse somehow.
Yeah,
That's skill.
but the quest of going to go slay Icefire, this is the thing that the Narcheska tells Dutiful that he needs to do in order for her to feel like they can move forward with what the wedding and the marriage and the alliance. When they agree to start setting off, and it basically leads into Fool's Fate, Chade and Thick sorta, but Dutiful and Fitz are like, we have to do whatever we can to make sure the Fool doesn't get on this boat. We have to prevent he can't come with us. And that was just a very interesting dynamic because I saw
Shade
both
doesn't
sides.
Want the loyalty split. Shade doesn't want to have Fitz being pulled both ways. Yep. Fitz doesn't want him to go because Fool's told him that I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And also Chade doesn't buy prophecy, I think, right? Like, and
no, he doesn't.
Probably have a sit down with him and be like, okay, this is actually kind of a thing.
This is a thing that happens. But Shade has his own knowledge, and he's gone, I want Icefire killed for the Alliance. Fool has stated openly he doesn't. So I don't want Fitz with that conflict, regardless of prophecy. Just the fact that Fool has gone, I will oppose this, has Shade going, well, you can't come then.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
And Fitz is like, just the fact that you said you're gonna die is you're not coming. And so that was yeah.
And then Fitz
so I guess with
the Fool, which is stressful. But also I was like, good luck, have fun at stopping him.
I know. He'll find a
way. My level of surprise when they got there and the Fool was already at the island was somewhere between 0 and 0. Minus. I was like, there he is. Yeah. You tried, but trying
it's one of those movie moments though. Like you can see the scene and the epic music as the reveal as Fool's sort of there on the headland. You're like, that's a movie moment.
That's way better than like him arriving when they're already there. They get there and he's just like
already
he's just like, I've been expecting you.
Mr. Chivalry.
I even in my head, I predicted the girl and the dragon. I was like, he's gonna go by
you
dragon.
Did. I remember.
I was like,
I confirmed this. This is true.
Wow. Well, that brings us to Fool's Fate
per series. That's how it works.
That brings us to Fool's Fate, which is a lot of people's favorite book. It's my favorite book so far in the realm of the Elderlings. Yeah, I just think there's so much that is crammed into this book that's
relentless.
This trilogy, but also everything that came before. It is emotionally relentless. I think you hit a certain point in this book, and it's just like every single chapter was something else, and I was just like, wow, it is nonstop.
300 pages worth. Yeah, it's 300 pages worth at the end. That's so tough.
I was shocked when the climax comes at like 60% of the way through the book. Yeah.
And you
learn like, what is left after this?
That affects previous books
so much.
And I do want to touch on it when they've not long been on the island, and Fitz finds the bits of a carved dragon in the sea, and he says, "I have found our forged folk. I found them. They're here in this bits of dragon." Now, I know I've spent a long time thinking about it, and I know you've read it quite some time ago, Chris, and Jake, I know you've been thinking about it. Has the knowledge of forging and how it's done and how we learn partial forging happens, how has that impacted your view of things in previous books?
Such as Kennet and Paragon? Yeah. I definitely think it plays a role in that. I've thought about the same thing because he's not forged, but he definitely loses himself because of what he does with Paragon as a child, which doesn't completely excuse his villainy, but definitely plays into it, which is a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually, that scene was when I was like, holy crap, Kenneth.
Yeah.
And then I was like, holy crap, Fitz in like the cavern in Fool's Errand when he was like, and then I was like, yeah.
It falls into place and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's a big thing for me. And it's why I'm like, please don't stop after the things that offend you in live ships, because it does get more context later.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, like, it does not, nothing excuses Kenneth
at all.
But it's just
it does explain the holes in
another piece of the extremely complicated puzzle that is the pirate Kenneth.
Because Wintrow states to Ita, he said, "There's something missing in him. I can feel it. There's missing. There's something that's not there that should be." And when you then learn that forging is this removal of memory, is this removal of identity, and you think right back to Night Eyes when Fitz is giving his memories to Girl on a Dragon, he says so explicitly, I don't want to be bonded to a forged one.
Yeah. And I mean,
it tells you exactly that. You're forging yourself.
Yeah. And you read Kenneth and you're like, he just doesn't get it. And it's like he doesn't get an aspect of morality. And it's exactly like, it should have been like, there's an entire series where like you forged ones who's more like ability to comprehend human relationships, like interpersonal relationships is just gone. And then you're like, Kenneth doesn't get, like, he doesn't have normal human intuitions about these things. And it didn't even occur to me until, Fool's Fate, that it's like, hey, those two things might be related. Just, maybe.
As a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a one of those things. And you can skip right by that really easily. And yet it's such a fundamental part of so many pieces of the story. That again, looking back, you can say at the very end later, well, that was retconned. No, it wasn't. It was there the whole time. I promise.
And this is reason 673 to not skip live ship.
Pretty much. So yes, sorry. That was just, I'm always very,
Well, I completely agree. I think all the background of forging and the information we got, that kind of cleared up a lot of, not everything, but a good amount of the questions I had finishing live ships and Farseer was very interesting. And, I guess we could just start here because we were talking about it, but what are your thoughts on the Pale Woman and, her introduction and everything when it comes to forging with the stone dragon she's creating and the Fool and how she treats, which is probably one of the most devastating parts in the series that I've
She should also step on Lego bricks.
She's one of the most wicked of villains that I think that Hobb has crafted, and I think it's so funny because Hobb has stated that she wasn't planning on really continuing the story of Fitz after the Farseer trilogy, which I think is a shame. It was a shame. I mean, obviously, I'm so thankful she did, but imagine if she hadn't, and the Pale Woman would have remained just this kind of elusive, dangling mystery from the first book. But in actuality, her story is quite interesting and fascinating in the way it relates back to the Fool and with the White Prophet is really fascinating, and she's just kind of like resentment and bitterness and hatred just taken to its like full-on extent, like as far out as you can get, and she is just kind of festered with this injustice of the fact that the Fool has been named this White Prophet. It's just really, really good, the way they wanted to change the worlds and how those two things came into conflict.
So it's a question for, I guess, everyone, but I feel like Derry's gonna probably have the best answer. Sorry, everyone, but she's read it 316 times.
Nearly.
Does the Pale Woman at one point says to Fitz and the Fool's changing color, and Fitz is like, yeah, he says that happens with all the White Prophets, and she's like, and who told you that? It's White Prophet, not white, then amber, then is she gaslighting Fitz? Does she actually know that's not true and what's happening to like the fool
Good
is
question.
normal, or does she actually think like she's telling the truth and that normally like historically white? Because I remember like a sense of relief when we get to what's name
Prokop.
Procop.
and he's like he was an old white prophet that's like, you know, like ebony colored, and being like, oh, thank fuck that, okay. But the question is like, does the pale woman know that?
It's hard to say
To
without
keep it
spoiling.
spoiler free,
Later books.
the answer is the pale woman has been taught that.
Okay, yeah, I've kind of thought that, but like I wasn't. And then you kind of get like, you know, why she's mad about it. She's like, I'm trying to fix the bloody world here.
Yeah, and
you're
it's
not
actually
helping.
you screwing it up.
And she's also somebody who's been like, I'm trying not to spoil because, like, believe it or not, you do actually learn more about the pale woman in later books. So I can't remember how much of what I'm about to say comes from later books. So I'm going to keep it very vague. But she's somebody who's just been told yes her whole life and has been led to believe that she is something extremely special. And what happens when that's kind of like, you know, taken out, like the gifted kid going to a bigger school and realizing they aren't that special. But it's just like really like twisted and bizarre when you read more about that kind of thing in the last trilogy.
Yeah,
I mean, certainty can be very dangerous, right? Like, and she doesn't have the healthy amount of doubt.
No, she has no doubt.
Well, we talked earlier about shade, sort of brainwashing Fitz from an early age. The same has been done with the pale woman, so that her reality is not reality, but she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So, like anybody, you know, everybody's the hero of their own story. She genuinely believes that this is the prophecy, this is what I have to do to enact it, and this person is just always in the way. In the same way that Fool is always determined that Regal was in the way, that we have to deal with these things to move the world to a better place. But we know Fool and we trust Fool, and we're like, of course we're going to do the things that Fool says because we love Fool. If we hadn't met Fool, what the pale woman is saying could make just as much logical sense.
Yeah.
Also, especially because like the kind of Fool's motives of like bringing dragons back, like it's plausible to argue that's a bad idea. Like it's not like that's obviously
long
like
discussions
with a good
that's
idea.
the correct decision.
They were wrong to do that.
So yeah,
That's a
when
bad
she's like, no, dragons are bad. The white prophet doesn't
what?
change color. That's like, okay, like that's pretty
Logical?
reasonable. Which is why, you know, when I see Procop, I'm like,
that is it, because it does sort of underscore Fool as being, yes, this is appropriate, this is how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But they are
I like what
points.
I like what Jennifer says. She said she is the opposite of the fool and shows the evil that can be done in the name of prophecy. And I agree with that. And obviously, like as you were saying, Derry, these are things that she was taught, so she believes that this is what the correct decision is. But yeah, it shows both sides of how prophecy, like what we saw from the fool in the Farseer trilogy and up until this point, it's not all good. And these are like the other side of what can happen when people start becoming obsessed with prophecy and like these types of things where they dedicate their lives in this type of, for this calling that they believe is the one and correct way of something. So yeah.
And I'd like to give props to Fitz for not being seduced. Good job, Fitz.
Absolutely.
We're all proud of you. We say you're an idiot a lot, but you know what?
You had it right that time.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
That scene was crazy. I mean, that just pulls the curtain back and there's like there's a fool.
I was like, oh my god, Fitz, no, Fitz, what are you doing? No.
Also, Derry had to read this series not knowing there's a trilogy called the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which just makes
I had to wait for Fool's Fate to be published.
Yeah.
So that was hard in itself.
Yeah, because like when the Fool told me he died, I was like lol, get wrecked, you're in Fitz and the Fool trilogy, you'll be fine.
Of course, at this point was rocking. I was like, oh my God.
You know what I actually started to think? I remember, because, by the way, what's with chapter 26 in Hobb? Because I'm pretty sure chapter 26 is like Lair of the Pale One. Chapter 26 is Ship of Destiny. Chapter 26 is... Okay, the argument in Golden Fool better not be chapter 26, or I'm going to be like, this is lit. Anyway.
I'm going to pay attention. I'm nearly there.
my like imagination got the better of me, and I was like, what if Fitz and the Fool is like the Fool has been forged, and the Fitz is like insists on like keeping him alive and trying to like take care of him, because that's how like Pale One was interrogating him. And that was so, you know, I didn't have that actually sounded more horrifying than the Fool dying. So then I still had, you know, plenty of tension there, because I was like,
whereas I was like,
that,
oh my
because
God,
I knew Fitz and the Fool trilogy was like, you know, I knew people were like emotional damage, and I was like, that would be emotional damage, and that would make the name of the trilogy make sense.
Yeah, I had to read that not knowing that anyone was going to come out of it.
I can't imagine. And I can't imagine, especially
it was the most stressful thing I have ever read.
I know, Josh.
And that entire ending when they are one and they shift between them and they acknowledge each other in all the fullness of who the other is as they exchange essences. I was beside myself, like properly beside myself. I was ugly crying. Like I had a hangover the next day. I was so dehydrated from crying. I was... there aren't even words for just how emotionally devastating the end of that book was for me. Well, no, that's not true. Because you know, you go on and you get that in Assassin's Fate, but I had that twice. All
right, now challenge for everyone: just read chapter 26 of every Hobb book back to back.
Because you need all the rest of it to give you that weight. You know,
it's an even better idea.
To make it count. But
put yourself through all the pain.
Honestly, the pain. Oh, and yet the beauty of it, all those tiny little threads, all the way through from the vision at the courtyard in Assassin's Quest of an ancient white with the rooster crown, through the crown itself being found at the end of Life Ships, to the feathers being found on the beach in Fool's Errand, all coming together for the rooster crown that we need at the end of Fool's Fate. All of those tiny, tiny moments that weren't all going to happen. What if he'd missed a feather? What if the crown had fallen out of the tree? All of these little tiny things that all just fell into place as they needed to reach that moment.
Yeah, for an author who says she doesn't like plan that much of stuff, I'm like, really? Because it really feels like you do. Because I love her description of what she does with outlines. It's one of my favorite author answers ever. She's like, yeah, my editor makes me write an outline, but I could use those outlines again because the books we got are like completely unrecognizable.
It's funny.
But yeah, it's just such an incredible tying up of so many things. But I mean, the time they spend on the island and you get them all being affected by ice fire. You know, we've seen people being affected by Thick when they're on the ship, and he's convinced they're all going to drown and they're all going to die, so they're all having nightmares. And he's physically impacting Fitz by crashing him into doors. So then when they get to the island and all of them are feeling this sense of weightiness and doom that ice fire is putting out there, Thick is losing himself completely, and none of them click that this is ice fire until too late, really, to do anything about it. We get to see Nettle's skill with the dreams. You know, the way she treats Thick was so beautiful. You know, that she can say to him, "You're safe now. I love you." And the jealousy Fitz feels, because no one ever told him that when he was small. And you're just like, oh.
Also, he specifically wants Nettle to tell him that, because like Nettle's his daughter.
Yeah.
And they've got quite an adversarial relationship at that point.
It's true. Man was a mad lad.
Burridge got one of the best.
Let's talk about Burridge.
Heart of the Pack.
Yeah. Wow.
Best. He is the absolute best. I love him.
It's so good.
I like how Fitz is like, yeah, we'll tell Birch, and it's like, what does Birch do? He's like, all right, we're going right now. It's like, of course you are, Birch.
Yeah, come on, let's do this.
Like oh my god, the moment they see each other for the first time was crazy because I mean at that point the fool's prisoner, right? And Fitz has come back and
just
is trying
rejected.
to get the other people.
Dislocated arm, and he's like,
and he sees
the paragraph
like
where he comes back that ends with like heart of pack and never let us come to harm might be like, you know, if you told me that's like the best paragraph, honestly, if you told me that's your favorite paragraph in fiction, I'd be like, great choice.
Valid.
Like, it might be top 2 and not second. Like,
well, because you read his tension and his fear and his all of the doubts and how am I going to do this and what do we need to do, and there's all of these things pressing on him, and you feel him just let it go when he sees Boric, because he's like, it's okay. And you feel that as a reader, you get that sense of, it totally is okay because Boric's here and he's totally going to get a grip on everything and everybody will calm down and it will be okay. Because that's how he's written, that we have that feeling when he shows up. You're like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. What's the age difference between those two characters? That's one thing I never really had pictured in my mind clearly.
not as much as I think you'd think, because I think when he's young, Fitz imagines him as being like really old, but I think he's like,
he's not.
No,
he's
I think
the
he's
same
like,
age as Chivalry, so he's 19 or so years older than Fitz.
Yeah.
So at this point, Fitz is 35. So he's about, he's in his early 50s, and so he's not as ancient as people think, because people have a lot of problems with he getting involved with Molly. And I'm always trying to say to them, it's not as huge a gap as you think.
No,
because for 6-year-old Fitz, it's like, the difference between Burge being like 26 and like 66. It's like
I think the lame.
He's for Fitz. There's like there's just this big category that's old for Fitz, and he's in that.
Yeah, I think
he does have a limp. And
the limp is what I think.
That does have a lot to do with it.
He's had some hard knocks,
He really does.
He's
we talk about how much Fitz has gone through. Boric's been through a pretty huge amount too. And for a lot of the same reasons in supporting Chivalry. So
they both felt kind of old at 35. Yeah, although skill healing, ironically, Fitz feels less old in Fool's Fate because he got the skill healing. In Fool's Errand, Fitz feels like,
he feels older than he is because he has been damaged so badly.
Yeah.
But,
and I think
he's awesome.
Like when they're trying to say after Bert, they realize that Birch is dying, and they try to heal him, and they realize that he's been blocked off from the skill,
and he'd been sealed so long ago.
And it was just like, okay, there's nothing else that we can do at that point. And it was just like, we have to accept it. That hit me so hard. I was not expecting that. I mean, I should have been expecting that at that point. Everything was like, every single chapter was another damaging.
Also, we had the return of the elf bark with Fitz losing his skill temporarily.
And
that was stressful.
Oh yeah, totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Also the all strain too. So Islander stuff.
And that's like someone was like, I haven't read Farsi in a long time. Like, I forget how the skill and the wit work, and they were on Fool's Errand, and I was like, it's very simple. When Fitz uses the wit, the reader is happy, and when Fitz uses the skill, the reader is sad.
That's not far wrong.
Especially in Fool's Errand. Because every time he's using Fool's Errand, he gets this horrible headache, and he's doing it because he can't resist the temptation. And every time he's using the wit, he's just it's Night Eyes being the best. So that's how the magic works.
Pretty much. Can't disagree with that.
But here we lose the skill, and the reader is sad. So.
Yes, but we do get the callback to the what they call it, the Dragon Mountain or something in Live Ships that Althea sees when she's out skinning the sea beasts. This big myth about the dragon that was felled by an arrow, and if you climb the rocky mountain, you'll see the arrow. And she does. And in this stone formation that looks just like a dragon, in its claws is a wizardwood arrow that Amber at the time is fascinated by, and just so happens to have got one with him when, as Lord Golden, we get to the island. And of course, this is the arrow that Swift is able to use.
So wait, how did Amber get the arrow?
We don't ever find out how she got the arrow. I imagine that she got it from Paragon while she was making him fits.
Yeah.
She just kind of,
because that makes sense to me, because she took so much matter away, and they were so close at that point. Paragon at that point gave her all his secrets, and she gave him all of hers. So it makes sense to me that that's where
she had years between books, or you had time to figure it out.
I just didn't know if that was. I didn't know if that was like explicitly revealed on the page.
Yeah, I didn't.
How she got that?
I didn't notice that the Wizard were there. That's one for live ship that's why Swift tell you. That's cool.
But this is the thing, people are like, oh, that's convenient. It was there. I promise it was there. And,
very naturally.
And you can not notice it, and you do get to those points and go, that's convenient. I promise you.
Does anyone ever have the most satisfying thing when someone's like, that came out of nowhere, and you're like, well, it didn't come out of nowhere because I predicted it. So take that. That's happened a couple of times in books, and I'm like, it was foreshadowed, and I know it was foreshadowed because I saw it coming and predicted it. So,
That's actually the hardest thing that I'm finding with all of these fabulous people coming into it new, is there are people, and I can't even say who because they are still reading, who are picking up the threads, and not only picking up the right threads, but putting them together the right way, which is rare. And I can't say anything.
You hit him with the
except go.
Yeah.
Like I can't
hit him with a thinking face emoji. That's
I've had to learn to be really careful with how I react.
I mean,
to
you know me, I enjoy deliberately misleading readers when
but
without
people know
lying.
That you do that.
Yes, yeah.
I do not.
But and yet people know I do that, and I still get them. I still trick them.
Yeah.
So, Alex has seen my shenanigans. Because I got you with Fool being Amber. So, or was that someone else?
Oh yes. No, that was me. I was like, I have a prediction. You were like, that's
no. He's like, he was like, wait, is like the Fool Amber? And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting theory. That'd be really interesting. Yeah. that would be really interesting. Is one of my
guessed
favorites.
It very hard
because then everyone is just like, oh, I guess it's wrong.
That's where I was like, oh, that's probably just a dumb theory. And then it moved on.
Yeah, well played, Jake.
It's just still fun.
So how do you guys feel about I was gonna say, how do you guys feel about resurrections? Because we get this one where
two at this point.
I love them.
Fitz finds. Yeah, I think I've never had a problem with them. I know some people really hate characters come back to life. I think the way Hobb does it, especially here with the Fool,
it's so earned.
Extremely well done. I can't think of one that's been better than that. And it was.
I like emotional. I actually don't hate resurrection fantasy, and I don't think it's cheap. I think it can be cheap, but I think that one of the things I like is if somebody's experience is transcended by death, and the Fool's is transcended by death because he didn't see a life beyond this. His whole life has always been able to predict the future, or at least be able to predict certain threads of the future. This is now, his life ended. That was supposed to be the end. That was where all the futures led. And so now he has to forge something new. So his experience is really transcended by death. Fitz's experience is very much transcended by death. The person he is moments before death is not the person he is moments after death. And so I think that
you see Fool's fear in that.
Yeah.
You see him genuinely scared. I've never seen this. I don't know what to do now.
So I'm gonna steal my answer from Ridima. Ridima tweeted this one, so I did not come up with this. And that is generally I'm like not the biggest fan of resurrections, but then when someone I really likes, I'm like, boy, you better walk it off.
It's earned, It was
I actually
it was like, this doesn't happen. It was in fairy tales. Maybe it could happen. Beric finds a way for it to happen. and then Fitz has to use the memory of it happening to make it happen. And it's like, okay, it's earned. It was built in very early.
Yeah.
That's
How
the bottom
it
line,
maybe
Gary,
could
'cause-
work.
Yeah, no, that's the bottom line, is it has to be earned, because I don't like it as a trope. But I think in both these instances, it was earned and it was done very well. I think of other places where I've encountered it in fantasy where I haven't liked it. I mean, Sanderson's the one right now. I'm back of my brain. I'm not liking that one, but it felt earned and it felt right. But there were still the consequences, how things are different afterwards. And I think that's a part of it too, how it's not just, oh, okay, everything's, copacetic, we're all good now. It's affects what happens afterwards. So I think it was earned here, and I had no problems with it. But I do most of the time have a problem with that trope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like it changes the relationship between Fitz and the Fool yet again. Here, like another thing that, another, as you said, an effect of death, and not only just these other decisions that have been made along the way. But I guess when it comes to Fool's Fate, the last thing I would ask as a big hot button issue is your thoughts on Molly and how the book is tied up with Fitz and Molly and everything that happens, when he comes back to Buck. Did you like it? Is it something that you think made sense, felt earned, like the resurrection did, or is it something that you just didn't think?
I think it's
was
earned.
in line?
I'm of this opinion of Molly. I like Molly because Fitz likes Molly. I don't like her. I will never like her. I have read multiple books where I've tried to like her. I only like her, without spoiling much, there is one book in the future where I like her. But these 6 books here, I find her insufferable. And I appreciate what she brings for Fitz. I appreciate their relationship together for what it is. Would I love to see Fitz instead with Ketrican? Yes. The person who I feel like would actually be the one true love, yes. But I get it. But I think as far as how their relationship works out, it's not. I think it's earned. I mean, like he has to seriously work to get back into her good graces.
Yeah.
Probably more than
And
I
it
think.
takes
I know.
over
I'm gonna
the-
quote my guy Tubib, who's a random Discord user who got me to read Realm of the Elderlings. So I feel like I need to represent his position here.
Hell yeah!
And when he's on, he likes Molly more than me. I really in the book, aforementioned book mentioned by Chris. I love Molly. In all the other books, I'm like, I don't dislike Molly, but I'm like, if you ask me which characters are more interesting than Molly, I'm gonna have a long answer.
Blade will be right up there.
Yeah. Maybe Blade, probably. But he did point out that of all the potential of which the main 3 would be like someone's gonna bring in celerity here, but with the main 3 would be like Molly, Ketrican, the Fool. The Fool and even Ketrican have less frequently in Ketrican's case, used Fitz as an end to get to what they're trying to achieve, mostly in Assassin's Quest for Ketrican. Molly is really one of the only people in the entire series who doesn't do this with Fitz and is not like, hey, Fitz, like, I, really like you, but also I'm going to need to use you because you're a royal bastard to achieve this end, or because you're a catalyst to achieve this end. And I think Pritchard is going to bring in celerity, which I'm like, okay, sure, why not? So I do think that is one reason why I can see like where Tubib is coming from, because Tubib, if you're watching this, Tubib, he's fully on Team Molly, and I'm kind of like, I'm happy with him going with Molly. I would have been happy with Ketrican. I'm kind of, but I think that's a pretty good reason.
Is celerity that one guy's daughter? That one Duke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Celerity of the character is more interesting than Molly would not have made that list. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. Although there was the scene in Assassin's Quest where like Fitz is like skill dreaming and I think sees celerity, and it was like, that was pretty badass.
Yes,
it was.
But AQ also has Fitz skill dreaming and seeing like Molly and Birch's place getting attacked, and Molly pretending to have the wit and
With the
controlling bees.
It's like the
Yeah.
one badass thing she does in the
that
whole
was
series.
Yeah, even Night Eyes
Forgot
gives her
about that.
props. Night Eyes is
Yeah.
just like, I think Night Eyes says, and
Forgot
I'm
about
quoting
that.
Night Eyes here, a most excellent bitch.
Yeah.
He does.
I love
And
Night
that is
Eyes.
high praise, let's face it.
High
from Night
praise.
Eyes.
Yeah, that's high praise from Night Eyes.
Yeah. I've always struggled with Molly. I've never been a huge fan. I've come to terms with the fact that it's jealousy because she gets to marry Burke. And I've also started to notice that all of my problems with their relationship and that she never really knows the whole Fitz is Fitz's fault because he never tells her. He keeps so much of himself secret from her. That's not her fault. And as you say, Jake, she never uses him for anything. So I'm like, okay. And then when we look at the end of False Fate, it actually takes place over a long period of time. It's a short bit of the book, but it actually takes a long time. And it's easy to miss because it is just, some letters. And you forget that these are taking weeks to get there and weeks to come back.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of effort that's gone in on Fitz's part to get to know the boys, to find a way into their lives that isn't an affront to what they've built with Burke. Because I was carrying a lot of...
And we get to have a mini heart attack in the middle.
You are going to replace Burke?
Yeah.
No.
And we get to have a mini heart attack in the middle when Fitz is like, no, the skill pillars are fine. I don't need to listen to
Oh
advice.
my God, yeah.
I'm like, bloody... Maybe they warned you about that for a reason. Just a thought.
Just a thought.
He literally almost completely screws it up. Like,
Sorry.
closing stretch.
The end of the book, patience.
Oh my God,
yes, that was phenomenal
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
I love Patience. I love
I
her
do too.
so much. And I was so with her when she was so angry with him. She was like, how dare you let me think you were alive? You were dead
Been
for
alive
that
this
time.
long.
How could you not tell
Yeah.
me? And you are gonna tell me everything that's happened. Start. I was so there with her. I was like, yes. Damn bloody straight. You make him tell you.
Fitz finally gets yelled at for the reasons we yell at him by the character. Normally, when Fitz gets yelled at, it's for different things than we're mad at him for. But this time, Patience is just like, hey, if I'd been
That
there when
wasn't
Burritt...
okay.
Yeah, no. Name drop yourself in Golden Fool, damn it. It's not that hard. Send a letter to Patience. Come on.
Yeah.
That's
So
just
I
another illustration of how
loved-
masterful her first person narrative is, that she's able to do
Mhm.
that, where we truly see Fitz through other people's eyes, even though it's through his perception, but we still get it and we still understand it. It's just so remarkable
And
to
we
me.
feel the love from Patience there, that how
Absolutely.
heartbroken she's been with the loss of him and how hurt that she is that he took those years away from her. Just love it so much.
Yeah, I loved everything about that whole, like, the last 150
God, they're
pages,
so
whatever it
good.
is. I mean, I didn't really find any, even with the Molly stuff. I was like,
Yeah,
even how it
same.
ended, I can see how, we'll be like, oh, it ends happily ever after. But I didn't mind that because, I mean, Fitz has been through so much at this point that I was
so
like,
much.
even a glimmer of some type of happiness for him that I felt earned in that moment was something that I was like, okay,
And
I see how this
is
would be
left
the end
open.
if this was the
Also, like someone commented this earlier, and I was like, that's a good comment. Content is not a synonym for content is not the same as happy. Those mean very different things.
Very different things. And we don't know where Fool is. That's left so where did he go? Is he okay? That's left so open. And yet we know from Fool's errand, when Jenna reads Fitz's palm, the love of your life is going to weave in and out of your life all of your days. So we know he's going to come back. We know that that's been left out. Even if, as planned, we were never going to visit this world again, we're left with the knowledge that Fool is going to come back into Fitz's life at some point. which was great. I wasn't very happy with not knowing where Full went. So I was very happy eventually when we got more. But it definitely led into my negative opinions about Soldier Son, because I did not want to talk about different people. I wanted to know what was happening with
that makes
the
sense.
realm of the Elders.
Also, by the way, the smartest person I know, sorry everyone else, but Faber doesn't even make sense. Probably an AI pretending to be a person. He when he read it, he thought the last 150 pages of Fool of Fate was like the best thing he'd read in decades. So I got the confirmation bias where I was like, he's the smartest person I've ever interacted with.
Yeah,
he agrees with me. So appeal to authority, go.
Yeah,
I'd stretch that to 300 pages, but yeah.
Okay.
So, and I can't be too mad at like Fitz ending up with Molly, because it results in one of the best pieces of writing we get, which is the poem that the Fool leaves for
in
Fitz.
the last dance of chances.
It's
my god, it's so good.
Like, it's like I have reread it so many times. It's one of the best things ever. And yeah, it's phenomenal. And if anybody out there Googles it on YouTube, somebody made a really dramatic song.
Really?
So if you want to get like really emo and just listen to it, it's really great.
I'm gonna look it up.
I'm gonna look that up one time.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's.
I see a couple. Do we know which one it? Armadillo or I see one with.
It's
there's
the
two
one
channels.
that almost has like a snowy background in the video, and it's like really over dramatic music. But yeah,
you know what? I'll just watch both.
Yeah, watch both.
Yeah. And link whichever one.
I just love that those things exist.
Yeah.
I guess before we we close this out, what is, I guess, just have everyone go around and say what your favorite book is in this trilogy. I'm guessing most of it will be Fool's Fate. But for me, it's Fool's Fate. Is anyone's answer?
Yeah, I'm taking Fool's Errand.
Fool's Errand.
Fool's Fate.
Yeah.
All the way.
Fool's Fate.
Yeah.
Fool's Fate. Yeah.
I'm not going to fight people who say Fool's Fate.
Nor am I.
But,
that is a valid choice.
But as I said, I have a one-word case for Fool's Errand, and that one word is Night Eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. All right. Well, does anyone have anything else to add about?
Do we want to let Chris quickly stand Soldier Son, just since that came out?
It's fantastic.
I am rereading this.
I actually prefer the Soldier Son to any of the Realm of the Elderlings. I've decided. I think it's the best trilogy she's ever written.
Wow.
Because I'm rereading this year. This year coming. I'm going to read in June.
Yeah.
June, July,
that
August.
Second book, Forest Mage. It's like
I've heard
her typewriter had to have been just like catching fire as she was writing it. Just like so good.
Okay. I will read it with a more open mind this time, I promise. Because I was just angry at it for not being what it wasn't. Yeah, that wasn't fair.
I'd say I'm content with this show.
Oh,
yes.
Well said.
Someone had to say it. She was like, let's see. She already had like the best final line of a trilogy, and she's like, I wonder if I could do a better one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that is all. I guess before anyone goes, everyone who's watching this live or watching in the replay, definitely go check out all 4 of these channels. They're all fantastic. I will link them down in the description below. Especially anything Hobb related, anything Realm of the Elderlings related. There's plenty of fantastic content on all of their channels about it, and anything else that you may want to look for, they'll have. But thank you, all 4 of you, for joining me tonight to talk about Tawny Man. Thanks to everyone in the chat. It was a lot of fun. I love this trilogy. Been thinking about it for a long time. So,
yep.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.